Bob Weiner joins us now, former Clinton White House spokesman and national Democratic strategist. Good to have you back on the program.
It's a pleasure, and thanks for having me, Lars.
So let me get your assessment. You're coming from the left side on this one. What chance does Newt Gingrich have going up against Barack Obama? Because it seems like we got a little good economic news today, except it really wasn't when you look at the numbers. But and Gingrich in the polls seems to go head-to-head with Obama pretty nicely.
Well, 8.6 unemployment is better than 9.1% unemployment, so you can't say it's not good news. And getting close to 200,000 new jobs is good, which now brings it to 3 million in 21 straight months of increased jobs. So there is progress that's being made, but Gingrich is a very smart politician. I spoke with him several times. I've known him when I worked on the Hill. And he told me during the Bush administration that the worst thing that Bush did was to privatize Social Security, and he's never seen the White House handle an issue worse. Then he says that there was an enormous error in the campaign when you tried to say that the Ryan budget was a good thing, that it actually hurts the extreme right. And now, as the Wall Street Journal just said, that Gingrich's gaffe was to tell the truth about deportation. You can't just send 11 million people back across the border. Of course, I don't want to see him.
That's such a straw man, Bob. You know it is. It's a straw man.
It is, but Gingrich was right about it, and the other candidates who are trying to be hard-nosed on immigration on that issue are being unrealistic. So I think he's a realistic politician. But I think he's probably the bigger danger than Romney, who's now been outed for flip-flopping all over the place from not only his health care bill, but abortion and immigration and Afghanistan and Libya. I mean, pick your issue, and he's been all over whatever sounds right. So I think that Gingrich is a more formidable opponent, but he also has the ability to flail and to be compulsive, and he really is a rich guy who wants to pretend he's the common man's non-politician when he won't answer Bob Schieffer on Tiffany's $500,000, and when he has $1.6 million that he made from Freddie Mac.
I got to ask you, though, the characterization you made at the beginning where you said it's not bad news, if the rate went down because the total number of Americans looking for jobs went down, then how is that good news at all?
That's what is always stated every time any unemployment number comes around. You can always double or triple the number
you can't
because of the people looking for jobs. That's always what people say about the unemployment number.
No,
so
but hold on. In this case, didn't the numbers actually show that 315,000 people stopped looking? So let's take it away from employment. Say you're running a hospital emergency room, and people say, well, the emergency room is too crowded. It needs to be bigger. We've got to have more doctors. And you go out and you find a way of discouraging half the people in the emergency room waiting area and saying, you know what, you're not going to see a doctor tonight anyway, so why don't you just leave? And they all go home. And then you say to your administrator, you see, I just solved your problem. Your emergency room isn't crowded anymore. And you say, yeah, you didn't make the demand go away. You just convinced people that there was such a low likelihood of finding a job that they shouldn't even bother looking anymore. That's not.
I totally agree with you. But what I'm saying is that is always what people say about the unemployment number. That hasn't changed. And not only that, but the people that are taking horrible jobs and the people that are working double families, multiple jobs and families is. So my question there is, given that we have 8.6% unemployment and we don't have 3, 4, or 5% anymore, how can the Republicans say the tax policy, the tax cuts is working and we want to do more of the same? That is such a nonsense policy when the numbers show that if you give the tax breaks to the middle and lower, not to the rich, you actually, according to CBO, triple the bang for the buck that you do with tax breaks for the rich. So how can they say the tax policy is working?
Well, Bob, I got to tell you something. If I were concerned about getting hired, giving $10 or $12 or $15 to each average worker per week is not going to get anybody hired. I've always worked for people who are part of that evil 1%. You know that? No, that I have. My whole life, I thought back to my very first radio job 36 years ago in Tillamook, Oregon. I was working for a guy who at the time, I'm sure, was in the top 1%. He had enough money to own a little radio station, and by the day's standards, he was a 1%er. And you know what? My paychecks always cashed at the bank. So when you tell me, well, we'll get farther ahead by giving the average guy a cut in the payroll tax of 10 or 20 bucks a week, I think, really? How many of those guys does it take to go out and hire another worker? Oh, the answer is that all the money in the world to the average worker, including me, is not going to make another job? You know that's silly.
Well, Lars, you have an enormous work ethic, and I have an enormous work ethic, and you and I have made a point of it our entire lives to do exactly what you just described. But it's been the banks and it's been the Wall Street companies who've exploded with profits, and income disparity has tripled in the last 3 decades, tripled for the top 1%, but for the rest of the 99%, and I hate to use the number that the Occupy Wall Street people have said, it has stayed stable. There's been only an 18% increase in income for them in the last 3 decades. So how has that worked if we are at 8.6 unemployment?
Can I tell you something, Bob?
At the beginning of the show, it has not worked.
But stepping away from the politics of it for a second.
That's economics, not politics.
Well, no, but let's take the economics. Do you know how you get a big paycheck? Know how to do something that very few people know how to do. If I was one of those 400 guys in the NBA that could put a basketball, no, if I was, I like using, because everybody can understand this, that there are only 400 people, maybe 500 in the whole world who can play basketball that well. So they get these gigantic paychecks. By the same token, while it seems like more of a mystery to the average person and the Occupy Wall Street crowd, the guy who can figure out how to run a gigantic company profitably is often one of those guys that there are only a few hundred of. And as a consequence, he gets a big paycheck. Now, what has happened down below? Do you know, Bob, we're importing nurses? Now, nursing pays real well. My stepdaughter is planning to go into it at some point. She's now working as a CNA, but she's working her way up the ranks. The day she gets her RN, freshly minted, she's worth $50,000 a year. And that's at the beginning. If she continues getting skills, nurses are worth over $100,000 a year in paycheck. Why? Because they have a rare set of skills, period. So we have a country that has said, we're not going to go after the rare skills anymore. Who are all the engineers at Intel and Microsoft? An awful lot of them, too many of them, are foreign nationals who've gone to school, done all the skull sweat to be able to be capable of writing code or designing circuits in a way that nobody else or few other people can do, and they get big paychecks. And what we have is Americans who say, well, I don't want to do that. So they don't become nurses, they don't become engineers, not as many, they don't become doctors, and that is going to take that average down. If the person in America wants to make more money, the answer isn't unions or government minimums. The answer is come up with a set of skills that the marketplace demands and that's in short supply, and there will be somebody who will write you a big check.
Well, I'm not sure. You have a valid point from one direction, but I'm not sure you're right that these are the people that create the jobs. What they have done is they've created gigantic profits for themselves and for their companies at the same time that
that's their job, isn't it?
They've so made efficient their companies that they've given the jobs to overseas and they've taken the jobs away from Americans at home. Romney has been so good at that at Bain Capital, but he was an expert on destroying jobs. And then he took it to Massachusetts and had the third worst jobs in the country in Massachusetts.
By the way,
so that's not what these people are good at, is helping the regular Americans. That's what government is for.
I'm talking to Bob Weiner, who's former Clinton White House spokesman. But the answer isn't to have the government go out and say, we're going to put a gun to your head and say you have to pay more for this man or woman's skills than they're worth. But let's go to the other comment you made. The president has been creating jobs. You know, Bob, that's the other dishonesty, I think. I went back and looked up the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the day Obama was sworn into office. And I looked them up for last month. So my numbers are only a month old now.
Right.
There were 2.4 million fewer people working last month than there were on the day Obama took office. So he can talk all day long about how he created 3 million jobs.
All right, now,
but if the net loss is 2.5 million, you can't call that an improvement in the job situation.
Lars, how much were we losing as Obama came in and now he has reversed the bubble
Not the problem.
of what Bush did?
You know,
if you answer that question, you'll answer your own question, because he inherited a dramatic
hold on, Bob,
bubble of losing jobs that he has now reversed.
You seem to like my metaphors. Let me throw one at you. Let's say they hire me to go to work at a huge radio station in a big market like New York, and it's worth a ton of money. And it's a radio station that's been falling in the ratings. So I take over, and the day I take over, I'm taking over a station that's been falling in the ratings, all right? And they let me have almost 3 years. And 3 years in, I go to the general manager and say, I want a bonus. In fact, I want to be re-signed to a new contract for the next 4 years. And the boss says, why should I do that for you? And I say, well, I've added ratings. And he says, no, I've looked at the ratings as they were on the day we hired you, and I've looked at the ratings last month. You've lost ratings since you got in. And I say, oh, yeah, but you were losing ratings when I came in. And he would say, yes, and your job was to reverse that. And I say, well, I did. I gained new ratings. And he said, but you lost faster than you gained, and the net result is lower than the day we hired you. Now, Bob, how can anybody who says, well, I did produce results, but the results weren't enough to offset, and the net at the end of the day is a loss, that doesn't bode well for re-election, does it?
He stopped a disaster in the making, and what
Elephant
Bush did
repellent.
with 2 wars and tax cuts, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that the Bush tax cuts depleted the Clinton profit. They took it away. They stole
The
it.
Clinton profit?
That's correct. We were in surplus as Clinton left office.
We were in surplus because Newt held the line on the budget.
We were paying for that. By the way, we're leaving Afghanistan and Iraq because they both were missed targets. They're not doing what we wanted to do. So that's what Bush accomplished that Obama had to reverse, and he saved the auto industry. He saved the financial industry that, if it had collapsed, would have been an absolute disaster for America, and that's what Bush left us.
Bob?
So, yes, he has made enormous progress, and that's why the American people aren't stupid, Lars. They realize that they don't want to go back to those kinds of failed policies, and that's why he actually is beating people in the polls. He's not losing to any of the Republicans. You know, there's no Republican that's more than at 25 or 30. Right now, Obama's at 45.
There's one. Wait till there's one. Bob, I appreciate you coming on, and if I don't see you before then, have a happy holiday season.
Same to you, Lars, and thanks so much. It's always great chatting with you and having a wonderfully spirited debate.
It's my pleasure. Bob Weiner, who's the former Clinton White House spokesman, national Democratic strategist, former White House staffer, and former chief of staff of the House Aging Committee.